And we're going to talk about some World of Warships here. It's obviously Ace's High is kind of defunct, so I've got to find something else to do. I've been playing a lot of Warships recently. I've been playing Warships since closed beta, and well, I might start teaching people how to do this. Anyway, submarines are on the way, and I watched somebody's video, eye chases, and just going to leave it there. Anyway, so we're going to talk about submarines and an honest review of submarines. iChase's video is pretty good, but there's a lot of information lacking. A lot of these guys that are playing these boats, outside of jingles to some extent, and really his information is some cursory Google searches. They don't really know what's going on in World War II, Cold War, ships, naval warfare, that kind of thing, how things operated. So, getting back to what we're talking about, submarines are on the way. I love subs. Subs are really cool. I've played hundreds of hours in Silent Hunter 4, 5, and I was trying to think, I ran another game that had some subs in it. But I've also read numerous books from World War II of different sub-commanders. A lot of good information out there, a lot of cool stories, a lot of really cool submarines. So I played the Halloween event with the submarines, and there was a lot of things that were interesting about it as an event, and there were a lot of things that concerned me, because if they had the Halloween event, to see how much interest there was in the actual subs. And there's quite a bit. I mean, a lot of people were really cool. Naval Field, or whatever the other kind of Steam free-to-play kind of game, had submarines in it, and a lot of people ran submarines. It was a lot of fun. So to have a game of this quality with submarines is an interesting thing. Of course, there is a lot of work to be done, and Wargaming, to sort of kind of their credit, are attempting to bring it in slowly and test it as well as possible. But let me tell you, they're going to piss a lot of people off right out of the gate, just because of what they can do with a good player at the command. A bad player is still going to be a bad player, a good player is still going to be a good player. It doesn't matter what the tool is. If they can use it, they will, and be effective with it. So let's talk about the submarines here. So they go into a little bit of business here, but we're really not worried about that. They show some submarines here, 4501. You can look at this. This is on the main page. First comers, the submarine tree will be built the same way as the aircraft carrier tree, with submarines at even tiers only. The first researchable submarine will appear at tier 6. This is in part because spreading ships between tiers allow us to balance them more easily within their respective matchmaking brackets, so plus or minus 2. And in part to have better differentiation between the initially implemented designs. Germany, the Soviet Union, and the United States will be the first nation to enter testing. Japan will be next in line for introduction into the game. My first deal is the Soviet Union had pretty trash submarines. Their boats broke up, they didn't work very well, they leaked real bad, they had no trained crews. Why they get a submarine, I have no idea, because it's Wargaming, and they love subs, and Russian bias, all that bullshit. The Brits should be the other one. Germany, the British, and the United States should be the 3. Why the Ruskies get a frickin' submarine, what the fuck ever. Anyway, pressing on. So the submarines are going to be the Shallot, the Salmon, and the Baleo. The Shallot was of V series, went out of service in 1938. The Salmon should be a Gato, and the Baleo would be a Baleo. The Baleo there was a ship called a Baleo, and it was of the Baleo class, which are big, huge boats. And the Salmon should be a Gato. And then you also had the Gar class. It could be a Gar, but I believe that it's a Salmon. I mean, it could be a Gato. I believe it is a Gato. So we have 6, 8, and 10. And of course we're going to have Germans, Russians, and Americans. Main features of submarines. Submarines are stealthy hunters, somewhat similar to destroyers. But what will they feature at this new time? Diving and servicing. Obviously, you know that they're going to dive and service. Charging the depth of a dive allows submarines to hide from enemies and become invulnerable to most sources of damage. However, submarines have a limited supply of oxygen in battle. Once they've depleted the supply, they must resurface to replenish it. We saw this in the Halloween event. I will showcase one of the videos from the Halloween event probably in the next couple days. So obviously we're using basic controls to dive and surface. Surface level, we're obviously gaining oxygen because we're on the surface and traveling. We can also launch torpedoes from the surface. Periscope level, we're actually below the surface. The ship is buttoned up, so we are using oxygen. Apparently you'll be able to use this pinging process, which we'll talk about. And you can also launch torpedoes from this depth. Deep underwater, looks like you're going to be using oxygen, obviously. But you can't see anything, sort of. Minimum detection will still apply for the submarine. We'll go into this. So there'll be 3 levels of depth: surface, periscope, and underwater. Yeah, anyway, surface, obviously, you're at the surface. Periscope, you're at periscope. Underwater, you're underwater. Here's with the underwater: the ships cannot detect a submarine in standard ways, including through the use of any consumable. So they won't be able to detect you with hydroacoustics. However, in this position, a submarine can be detected by another submarine in periscope depth and underwater position at a distance of 2 kilometers or closer. She also has no chances of launching torpedoes or spotting anyone except from a distance of 2 kilometers or less. Oxygen is spent and the hydrophone is turned on. So, going into that, you go, well, why can't I launch torpedoes underwater? Modern submarines launch torpedoes underwater. It's because of pressure differential. Modern submarines are capable of opening their torpedo doors, flooding the tube, and launching a torpedo underwater completely separate from the boat. Now, this happened in a World War II submarine, but the technology was not as good, nor did they have a guidance system. So there was no reason to launch a torpedo because you couldn't see where it was going underwater. In modern times, you actually have active homing, wire-guided torpedoes that track to a target. World War II, you had dumb torpedoes. We'll go into this a little bit more. But another submarine can spot another submarine underwater at under 2 kilometers. But there's really no way for you to attack it. And a submarine can spot a ship, a surface vessel, at under 2 kilometers. But the surface vessel cannot spot the submarine because it's underwater. Kind of a weird deal, but it makes sense to me. Because you would be able to detect it with your hydrophone. You'd be able to hear it coming over the top. But that's just how they're kind of going. So talking about your concealment. You have a standard 100%, your maximum concealment at the surface, all the way submerged to any boat. So a submarine at periscope depth or a surface vessel. At periscope depth, meaning just the periscope sticking up, your maximum spotting range is cut in half to any vessel that could spot you. Underwater, no vessel on the surface or periscope depth would be able to spot you. Actually, excuse me. No vessel on the surface would be able to spot you. And at 2 kilometers, a submarine can detect you underwater or periscope depth, which I think is a little cheesy if you're not actually at periscope depth. But so the hydrophone works in a kind of deal. When underwater, a submarine becomes blind and sees other ships only with the help of her hydrophone, which determines the direction to the nearest ships. The hydrophone displays 3 ranges, long, medium, and short. Indicators will light up on this interface to allow you to understand how far away the ship is. So it's kind of like RPF in a way, but it actually has ranges to tell you how far away the boat is until you get inside that 2 kilometers, and then you'll automatically detect them anyway. In real life, the way that the hydrophone works is essentially you have a big microphone underwater, and you swivel this guy around, and you go, I can hear something underwater. If you watch U571, you'll understand kind of how it works. This hydrophone, you rotate it on a wheel, and as it rotates, you know which direction it's pointing, and you go, hey, I hear a ship that sounds like a warship, a destroyer with fast screws, fast propellers. Or it sounds like a trawler with very slow propellers and, a very crappy engine. And you can tell about how far away it is based on how close it is to you and whatnot, but you can at least get the distance or the range, the direction. So here is showcasing that as it goes out, you go, okay, there's a vessel at medium range, there's one at far range, and max range here. Together with the hydrophone, we've added a visual effect that displays sonar waves emitted by the ship, outlining and highlighting the underwater terrain around the submarine. This is not only beautiful and fascinating, but also enables players to better navigate underwater. In consideration of the abilities of the new ship type, you can expect the game maps to be updated. Obviously, you'd have to update the underwater area to know. Armament. The main armament carried by submarines is torpedoes with hydroacoustic guidance. In World War II, they did not have any type of guidance systems. There was no guidance systems for torpedoes. But it's a game. They're adding it in. We'll talk about it. While at periscope depth, a submarine can emit a sonar ping after firing a torpedo. You'll see a special new indicator next to your torpedo icon when sonar is active. The emission mechanics work in the same way as with the usual torpedo launch. Lead your target and click the left mouse button. If the ping hits a designated point on the bow or stern of the target ship, the torpedo will be guided to the target. However, the maneuvering characteristics of a torpedo won't always be enough to accurately hit the target. After the target is pinged, hit by a sonar ping, for a second time, the torpedo will dive deeper. This allows it to detonate underneath a ship's hull, ignore anti-torpedo protection, and deal much greater damage. The primary targets for torpedoes are slow-moving ships. Faster and more agile ships with the proper skills applied will be able to escape attack by executing timely maneuvers. So, we're going to watch the video in the next video of what they showed at Gamescom, and then actually showcases a lot of this stuff. So at periscope depth, when you're targeting a vessel, it has these two ping indicators, and what you'll do is you'll fire your torpedoes. I saw pings and then torpedoes launched, but it could have been in between. They're saying that you'd have to launch the torpedoes first and then ping the target. So if you ping the front or the rear of the vessel, the torpedoes are actually going to sort of home to the target. In the video, if you watch it from their stream from Gamescom, it's very sluggish, and a destroyer easily outmaneuvered it. In fact, the only time it got hit was the guy actually just drove into them to showcase them getting hit, but he could have easily avoided them. So he pinged one position, and the torpedo will actually track the target somewhat. This is not going to be effective for the most part against fast cruisers that are paying attention or destroyers, but against battleships or carriers, it'll be outstanding at long-range shots because it's kind of a fire and forget. You ping, you launch it. But me, I would still fire blind. Just launch the torps and let them work their standard deal. They'll see the torpedoes, but you haven't given away your position by pinging. And this goes into why. However, you have to be extremely careful when using the sonar. After every emitted ping, enemy ships will be able to determine your submarine's last location, and it'll be displayed on their mini-maps. Besides this, submarines will also have new unique consumables and abilities that emphasize their unusual features and specific gameplay style. So the reason why, in my opinion, you wouldn't want to ping a vessel is because, number one, you're giving away your position on the minimap currently in its build. And destroyers are going to come running to you to try to kill you because obviously you're a pretty big threat. Standard fired torpedoes, no ping, you're launching them just like a regular vessel. They know they came from a certain direction, but they don't know roughly where you are. One of the other things too is that if a boat sees you ping super close, you may get surprised by a destroyer hiding behind an island, or if you had launched them from a certain direction to kind of corral a ship to go into a certain direction of where you really are wanting them to go so that you can make a much better attack pattern, or a much closer range double ping for a guaranteed hit for maximum damage, something like that. So there's ways to game it, to do it, and it's a risk versus reward. You can fire blind, or non-tracking, and you should be able to get away with it. But if you do the tracking and it works, you can do a lot more damage. So we'll see how it plays in, but currently I would be of the mindset to just fire without any kind of tracking, unless I was attempting to draw a destroyer in and attack it. Let's see here. Consumables. Maximum depth allows you to dive deeper than the standard underwater level and avoid taking damage from depth charges. Snorkel increases the time to conduct an attack. When activated, the submarine stops spending oxygen and starts accumulating it instead when at periscope level. O2 regeneration increases the time a submarine can spend underwater, and enhanced active sonar increases the effectiveness of sonar pings. We'll have to kind of see how that works. The snorkel is going to be a German device. That was a device that the Germans built in World War II so that their submarines did not have to completely surface. So essentially, they could stay at periscope depth. They had a snorkel that would bring fresh air in, and using that fresh air along, it would also allow them to run their diesel engines underwater because they had exhaust and fresh air coming in to run the diesel engines. So they could stay underwater indefinitely as long as the snorkel was working properly. which means they didn't have to surface, because in 43, 44, the U-boat, the Kriegsmarine, were taking such terrible losses in men and material that they had to come up with something. The snorkel was the device that they used where they could stay submerged, mostly underwater, and still run their diesel engines to charge their batteries and get fresh air into the boat. The O2 regeneration, max depth, and the active enhanced sonar, we'll see how that works. Countermeasures, submarines are relatively slow. In my opinion, no. Underwater, they should be slow, but in the game, they're not, because it's a game. Their speed on the surface is a mere 25 to 30 knots, which is pretty quick. It's not, most destroyers are 30, 35, but for a ship, that's still pretty good clip, 25 to 30 knots. At periscope depth, their speed is reduced further. When underwater, submarines will be able to cruise at the same speed as when at the surface. So you can go 25 or 30 knots on the surface, but you can also do it underwater, which is nice because you're going to be avoiding destroyers and maybe some cruisers and the like, and you're going to need that speed. If a submarine is detected on the surface or at periscope level, she can be attacked with HE shells, rockets, or bombs. Such armaments will be able to affect targets within a certain radius of impact, splash damage. So, in reality, when an aircraft attacked a submarine, you could be underwater and be attacked by a ship. Now, really, if you were at depth, you were cruising along, you'd already dove to, periscope depth, you could drop a special type of bomb that was much like a depth charge. Or it was, but it was aerial. And it would drop down there to a certain depth and it would blow up and damage the ship. Of course, if it's on the surface, it's just like a regular boat. You attack it with machine guns and rockets and bombs. Also, one of the things that when I was watching Chase's video, he was kind of surprised when shells hit the water and still damage the vessel. And that's because, just because a round hits the water doesn't mean the shell instantly stops. It will actually punch through the water, and if it's at the right trajectory, it'll still hit the boat and damage it. So you can still be damaged even at periscope depth because you're only 10 to 12 feet underwater, and that's not enough to stop a 5-inch shell or any other weight for that matter. Submarine can damage another submarine with torpedoes or by ramming them. Effective use of sonar ping can allow torpedoes to dive to a certain depth and hit enemy submarines. What should you do if a submarine has dived as a surface vessel? In such case, she can't attack anyone, but other types of ships won't be able to attack her either. Yeah, so she can't hit you on the surface, obviously, but you can't do anything to it, for the most part. That's where destroyers, the main opponents of submarines, come in. They'll be able to effectively track submarines and hit them with depth charges. Nearly all destroyers will be equipped with this weaponry, with rare exceptions for which the use of such arms wasn't historically implemented into the design of the ship. There are certain destroyers that were built as maybe a destroyer leader, or as like a heavy escort or something like that, and they just didn't have the weight to load hydroacoustic gear and depth charges and the like. So those vessels won't be able to counter submarines, but the majority, 95% plus, will be able to attack submarines. And I would imagine at some point some cruisers would be capable of it, but it'd be very specialized circumstances. It'd have to be a light cruiser, one that happens to be like a multi-role. So essentially, indicator warning of a submarine, typically when you're pinged, as when I was watching the Gamescom deal, was that the submarine would ping the vessel, or for whatever reason, it would get an indicator of the submarine. It would travel to that point, the destroyer would, and then the indicator would move to another point, and it would have a timer. And then, of course, the destroyer would move to that point, and if it was where the submarine was at, depth charges would automatically deploy and damage the ship, unless you do your deep dive or counter in some other way. If an enemy submarine is detected within a radius of 4 to 5 kilometers of a destroyer, meaning that you get spotted, a special indicator will inform the ship's commander about this. When approaching an enemy submarine, a destroyer can see her estimated last known location. Having arrived at this area, an updated location will be displayed. This will happen several times. Though the submarine itself will still remain invisible to her enemies, eventually, having followed these location indicators and caught up to the submarine, the destroyer will be able to carry out an attack with depth charges. To launch them, you just need to float over the detected submarine. The charges will launch automatically. And that's pretty much it. So they said that, they're going to put out more stuff and as it continues. And essentially this is going to go through an alpha, this is going to go through beta, and then it's going to come to a specialized server that will be separate. And let's see, the open testing will take place. During this stage, you'll be able to share your opinions with us and among the first players to try out our new ship type. We're planning several testing iterations. During the second stage, will be something like a beta test for the new type. Initially, only some of the players who submit their applications will be able to participate in the testing. Access will gradually be expanded, and in time, everyone will be able to take part in the submarine trials. After this comes the third stage. We'll add submarines to the live client as a separate battle type, similar to arms race, savage battle, space battle. The third stage will last several months. This will enable us to make the final touches and adjust the balance of the new type on the live server. When we're done with all these steps, we'll be able to decide on the final fate of submarines. So they're going to run it through a very rigorous course, and I would imagine they're going to get quite a bit of hype about it, and I would imagine that they're going to be pretty powerful when they enter the game. There's going to be a lot of really good players that are going to run these boats, myself included, and they're going to cause a lot of frickin' problems. But there's going to be a lot of crap players too that are going to run them, and they're not really worth a damn in them because everyone has their own playstyle. But there's going to be a lot of people that piss off a lot of people with submarines. But we want to be ready for it, and I think that this is a pretty concise deal that they put out here. They've just told us what they're going to do. They told us what boats they're going to add. And we're going to go into that a little bit more. So I'm going to cover the Gamescom video of what we actually see in the next video. And I kind of had a deal, kind of bash and chase a little bit. I'm not going to do that because it's not right. It's not nice. And I try to be a nice person most of the time. And ultimately, we are going to take a look at that and kind of see what we see. And we're going to just stay on top of it and see how it develops. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them down below. If you haven't subscribed, please do. This channel has a lot of old videos on it that are pretty good, including some old Silent Hunter 4 videos. You can dig through my channel. It's been around for 10 years now. And it's not a very big channel. Played a lot of flight sims and things like that. But I've played a lot of ships. I've just didn't feel I was at the level where I felt confident in putting out content. And now, having played it since closed beta, I feel that I'm at a level where I can actually apply some knowledge and some information to it and put some content out there. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you did. Comment, subscribe, and have a good day.